this entire issue. Thanks for watching, and remember, awareness is the first step to change. Number 6. Racial disparities exacerbated. Right now, lawmakers across the state are proposing harsher penalties for sleeping in public, living in encampments, or simply existing without a permanent address. If passed, these laws could allow police to detain people just for being homeless. And this isn't speculation, it's part of a growing national trend to criminalize poverty rather than solve it. Imagine waking up one day with no home, no safe place to sleep, and no legal right to be outside. No warning, no protection, just the threat of jail or forced relocation. This isn't a scene from a dystopian novel, it's a real possibility, and Texas may be the first domino to fall. What happens next could set a dangerous precedent that spreads far beyond state lines. In this video, we're breaking down the 10 major consequences this could unleash on society, on public health, on our economy, and maybe even on your own city. Stick around, what you hear might shock you. Number 1. Increased incarceration rates. If Texas moves forward with laws targeting homelessness, one of the most immediate and devastating effects will be a sharp rise in incarceration rates. Under proposed policies, simply existing in public spaces without a home could become a jailable offense. That means thousands of people, many of them suffering from mental illness, addiction, or just bad luck, could be rounded up, handcuffed, and locked away, not for committing a crime, but for not having a roof over their heads. This shifts homelessness from a humanitarian crisis to a criminal issue, turning poverty into punishment. We've already seen where this road leads. In cities like Los Angeles and Phoenix, similar crackdowns led to overcrowded jails filled with unhoused individuals. Many were held without access to proper healthcare or legal support, creating a revolving door system. They get arrested, released, and re-arrested within weeks. And here's the kicker. It costs far more to incarcerate someone than to simply house them. Taxpayers foot the bill while the root causes of homelessness go completely unaddressed. It's not just ineffective, it's backwards. Beyond the numbers, there's a deeper question. What does it say about a society that chooses jail cells over solutions? When people are arrested for sleeping on benches or resting under bridges, we're not solving homelessness, we're hiding it. And worse, we're feeding it into a system that often makes it nearly impossible to escape. A criminal record makes it harder to find jobs, rent apartments, or qualify for assistance. So ask yourself, are we helping people, or burying them under the weight of broken policies? Because once the cycle starts, it doesn't just trap the homeless. It slowly chips away at the kind of society we claim to be. Number 2. Overloaded shelters and social services. If mass arrests of unhoused people begin, the next domino to fall will be emergency shelters and social services, and they won't be ready. Most shelters in Texas are already stretched thin, operating at or near capacity every single night. Now imagine thousands more people suddenly being pushed off the streets by force.
My name's Brandon and I'm with the Fred's Appliance sales team. Today we're going to talk things to consider when remodeling a home. First of all, the layout of the kitchen. Is the customer wanting to do a built-in?
Where will they go? The system simply can't absorb that kind of impact overnight. It's like trying to funnel a flood through a garden hose. Something will burst. We've seen this happen before. In cities like San Francisco and Miami, attempts to clean up public spaces led to a massive overflow in shelters, emergency rooms, and mental health clinics. Staff became overwhelmed, resources ran out, and vulnerable people were left in even worse conditions than before. When shelter beds are full, people are often placed in temporary holding centers, many with poor sanitation, lack of mental health services, and in some cases, no clear plan for what comes next. It's not a solution, it's a shuffle. And here's the deeper problem. This approach actually makes things harder for the very people who are trying to help. Non-profits, caseworkers, and housing coordinators are suddenly faced with larger caseloads, tighter deadlines, and far less funding per person. Instead of building long-term solutions like permanent supportive housing or trauma-informed care, they are forced to triage crisis after crisis. It's a fast track to burnout and collapse. So while politicians might claim these policies are about restoring order, what they are really doing is breaking the last support systems we have for getting people off the streets for good. Number 3. Taxpayer burden. Here's something that might surprise you. It's actually cheaper to house someone than to jail them. Yet, Under these proposed policies, Texas could be choosing the more expensive, less effective route, paid for by you, the taxpayer. On average, it costs over $30,000 per year to keep just one person in jail. Compare that to permanent supportive housing programs, which can cost as little as $10,000 to $15,000 per person annually. And those programs often come with mental health care, job training, and addiction support. In other words, we're not just talking about wasted money, we're talking about wasting it on systems that don't even fix the problem. Cities that have already gone down this path offer some serious warning signs. In Los Angeles, the city spent hundreds of millions of dollars ramping up enforcement against the homeless, only to see the numbers continue rising. Arresting, processing, and jailing someone is expensive. Add to that the cost of emergency medical care, court proceedings, public defenders, and the eventual release with no long-term plan, and it's a never-ending bill. You're paying for that through your local taxes, and chances are you're not even seeing results. It's like trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline on it. Loud, dramatic, and totally ineffective. And here's the kicker. When we criminalize homelessness, we're not just wasting money, we're diverting it from actual solutions. Every dollar spent on jail beds is a dollar not spent on affordable housing, shelter improvements, mental health services, or job programs. So ask yourself, do you want your taxes funding real change, or just temporary cleanups that push the problem out of sight until it returns, stronger and more expensive than before? Because once this kind of policy is in place, it becomes very hard to reverse. It sets a budgetary precedent that prioritizes punishment over progress, and once we're on that path, turning around may cost us even more. Number 4. Decline in public health. When you force people out of the only places they have to sleep, rest, or access community help, you're not just moving bodies, you're spreading illness. One of the most overlooked consequences of criminalizing homelessness is its massive impact on public health. Imagine hundreds, maybe thousands, of people being suddenly displaced, no access to hygiene, no clean water, no regular meals, and no access to ongoing medical care. Conditions like diabetes, tuberculosis, HIV, and mental illness don't pause just because someone's been kicked off the street. In fact, without stability, they get worse, and fast. Hospitals and emergency rooms already report being overwhelmed by the lack of continuity in care for homeless patients. Arrests and forced relocations only make this worse. When someone is jailed, their treatment is interrupted. Their medication may be stopped. And once they are released, they often have no medical follow-up, no transportation, no prescriptions, just a bus ticket and a bigger struggle than before. This isn't just harmful to them, it affects everyone. Outbreaks of hepatitis A, MRSA, and even COVID-19 have been traced back to unsheltered populations being pushed from one location to another without proper health oversight. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When we ignore the health of the homeless, we put the entire community at risk. It's easy to pretend it's not your problem until the diseases don't stop at city limits. The longer we allow policies that displace and destabilize vulnerable people, the more we all pay in public health crises, insurance costs, and emergency services. Real public health solutions come from stability, access, and prevention, not punishment. If we want safer streets and healthier cities, the answer isn't a jail cell. It's investment in real care before minor problems become deadly outbreaks. Number 5.
The second the tweet went out, I was vehemently attacked. I disagreed with them on this one topic, and all of a sudden, I just immediately went out of my...
Number 5. Erosion of civil liberties. At the heart of this issue lies a disturbing truth. Criminalizing homelessness doesn't just target the homeless. It threatens the civil liberties of everyone. When governments begin to treat public presence as a crime, they blur the line between law enforcement and social control. In Texas, proposed policies could allow police to detain someone not for theft, violence, or endangerment, but simply for existing in a public space without a permanent address. That means sleeping in a park, sitting on a sidewalk, or resting at a bus stop could become grounds for arrest. And if that sounds like a slippery slope, it's because it is. Civil rights organizations have already sounded the alarm. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, warns that these kinds of laws violate the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, especially when someone has no other alternative. Imagine punishing a person for sleeping outside when there's no shelter space available. It's not just unethical, it could be unconstitutional. But while legal challenges play out in courtrooms, people will continue being arrested, fined, or displaced long before a judge ever weighs in. And once these laws are in place, they are often expanded quietly, piece by piece, until anyone on the margins becomes a target. And here's the truly chilling part. Once we accept that being poor or unhoused is enough to justify surveillance, removal, or detention, where does it end? Today, it's the homeless. Tomorrow, it could be street vendors, protesters, or anyone simply deemed undesirable. Public spaces are meant to be shared, not policed like private property. By normalizing the removal of certain people from public view, we risk turning our cities into gated communities, patrolled not for safety, but for appearances. And in doing so, we sacrifice the very freedoms we claim to protect: freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, and the right to simply exist. If this video made you stop and think, even for a second, then don't let the conversation end here. Hit that like button to help more people see this. Subscribe to the channel for deep dives into the social issues shaping our world, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. We want to hear from you. White right pointing back hand index, do you think criminalizing homelessness is the answer? Or is there a better way forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one, and your voice matters here. And if you want to learn how some cities are actually solving homelessness without punishment, watch our next video on the Housing First approach. It's eye-opening, it's hopeful, and it just might change the way you see this entire issue. Thanks for watching, and remember, awareness is the first step to change. Number 6. Racial disparities exacerbated. Here's something that often gets left out of the conversation. Homelessness isn't just a poverty issue, it's a racial justice issue. Across the United States, people of color, especially Black, Latino, and indigenous communities, are dramatically overrepresented in the homeless population. In Texas, for example, Black residents make up about 13% of the population, but nearly 40% of the homeless population. These numbers aren't just statistics, they are the result of decades of systemic inequality in housing, employment, education, and criminal justice. And when homelessness is criminalized, those same communities are hit the hardest. Again, let's be honest, policies like these don't get enforced evenly. Historically, people of color are more likely to be stopped, cited, or arrested for low-level offenses. So when new laws target camping in public or loitering, who do you think is going to feel it first? The data is clear. When cities increase policing of the homeless, Black and Latino individuals are disproportionately impacted, leading to even more arrests, fines, and criminal records. It's not just unfair, it's a pipeline that leads directly from poverty to prison. And for communities already struggling with distrust in law enforcement, this only deepens the divide. The result? A cycle of racialized poverty that becomes harder and harder to escape. Once someone has a criminal record, their chances of finding housing or employment drop dramatically. And when those barriers hit hardest in already marginalized communities, the gap just keeps widening. So while politicians may argue these laws are about cleaning up the streets, the reality is they risk becoming a tool of racial profiling and exclusion. We have to ask, are these policies solving problems or targeting people who've already been pushed to the edge? Because if we're serious about addressing homelessness, we can't ignore who it's affecting the most and why. Number 7. Negative impact on children and families. When we talk about homelessness, it's easy to picture single adults on the street, but tens of thousands of homeless people are families with children. In fact, many are single mothers fleeing domestic violence, or families who were evicted due to job loss, rising rents, or medical debt. These are people trying to survive, not criminals. But under new laws being proposed in Texas, entire families could be detained, separated, or displaced just for sleeping in their car or seeking shelter in a public space. The trauma that follows can be life-altering, especially for children. Studies show that children who experience homelessness are far more likely to suffer from emotional and behavioral disorders, fall behind in school, and face long-term health issues. If their parents are arrested or fined, those children may end up in foster care, which comes with its own set of risks and long-term consequences. Weiss, Some families may avoid seeking help altogether, fearing that contact with authorities could lead to their children being taken away. This drives them further into the shadows, making it even harder for outreach workers to connect them with the support they need. Criminalizing family homelessness doesn't just create fear, it breaks apart the very unit that could help these people rebuild their lives. Instead of stability, children grow up learning to live in survival mode, watching their parents treated like criminals for trying to protect them. We risk raising an entire generation that associates law enforcement with punishment, not protection. And long after the headlines fade, the impact will still be felt in classrooms, clinics, and communities. If we truly care about the future, we need to protect our most vulnerable families, not push them deeper into crisis with laws that punish them for. Number 8. Cycle of homelessness intensifies. Criminalizing homelessness doesn't solve the problem, it cements it. When a person is arrested for sleeping in public or living in their car, they don't just walk away with a warning. They often leave with a criminal record, a fine they can't pay, and even more.
Wherever the road takes you, Chevy is ready to drive you forward. With pure power unleashed.
And even more barriers to escaping poverty. That record can follow them for years, making it harder to get a job, apply for housing, or qualify for government assistance. Instead of being offered a ladder out, they are given a heavier burden to carry, one that pushes them deeper into the very situation they were punished for. This cycle is well documented. Studies show that once someone enters the criminal justice system because of homelessness, their chances of experiencing chronic homelessness rise significantly. With every arrest comes court dates, missed opportunities, and mounting legal debt. And when shelters are full and affordable housing is scarce, as it is in much of Texas, many people end up back on the street, only to be arrested again. It's a loop, not a solution. And once you're caught in it, it becomes harder to focus on recovery, employment, or anything beyond immediate survival. And let's not forget the psychological toll. Being treated like a criminal simply for existing in public space can destroy someone's sense of self-worth, making it even harder to reach out for help. The system isn't just ineffective, it's actively harmful. If our goal is to reduce homelessness, we should be building bridges to permanent housing and support services, not trapping people in a cycle of punishment and poverty. Because the more we criminalize, the more we prolong the very issue we claim we want to fix. And the cost of that, socially, economically, and morally, is far too high. Number 9. Public backlash and social division. Whenever cities and states take aggressive action against the homeless, it doesn't just affect those on the streets, it divides entire communities. While some residents may initially support these measures, hoping for cleaner parks or safer sidewalks, that support often fades when the real effects kick in. Mass arrests, tent sweeps, and public confrontations tend to attract media attention, protests, and lawsuits, sparking intense debate over what kind of society we're becoming. And instead of bringing people together to find lasting solutions, these policies often pit neighbors against each other and against the most vulnerable. We've seen this play out in cities like Denver, Seattle, and New York. When laws were introduced to criminalize homelessness, communities became battlegrounds. On one side, frustrated residents and business owners demanding change. On the other, activists, nonprofits, and faith-based groups fighting for compassion and human rights. The result is usually a surge in social tension, mistrust in local government, and public outrage. Many cities ended up reversing their crackdowns, not because they didn't work, but because they ignited fierce backlash from people who believed we should be doing better than pushing people out of sight. But perhaps the most dangerous outcome is the long-term erosion of social empathy. When we normalize the idea that some people don't belong in public spaces, we begin to justify policies that exclude and dehumanize. That kind of thinking spreads fast. It teaches communities to fear the poor instead of understanding them, to prioritize aesthetics over people. And once that mindset takes hold, it becomes harder to build the trust and cooperation we need to actually fix the problem. Public division becomes the norm, and in the chaos, real solutions are delayed, ignored, or abandoned altogether. Number 10. Missed opportunity for real solutions. Perhaps the greatest tragedy in all of this is not just what these policies do, but what they prevent. By focusing on punishment instead of progress, Texas risks ignoring the very solutions that have been proven to work. Across the country, cities that invested in long-term, supportive housing, like Houston and Salt Lake City, have seen dramatic reductions in homelessness. These programs connect people with stable housing first, then provide mental health services, job training, and addiction recovery. It's called the Housing First model, and it works, not just morally, but financially. But when funding is funneled into jails, police sweeps, and temporary holding centers, those resources are pulled away from housing programs, healthcare initiatives, and community outreach. We're not just taking the wrong path, we're shutting down the right one. Every dollar spent on enforcement is a dollar not spent on affordable housing developments. Every minute police spend removing encampments is a minute caseworkers could be helping someone find stability. And the longer we delay meaningful action, the more expensive and complicated the crisis becomes. In the end, criminalizing homelessness is a policy of avoidance, a way to make the problem less visible, not less real. But homelessness doesn't disappear when you move it. It just resurfaces, more entrenched and more hopeless than before. Texas and the rest of the country has a choice. We can invest in strategies that lift people up, or we can double down on ones that push them further down. One path leads to dignity, safety, and solutions. The other leads to a revolving door of suffering. Which one do you think we should take? What's happening in Texas isn't just a policy shift. It's a warning sign, a signal that we're at a crossroads where fear and discomfort are being prioritized over compassion and real change. We've walked you through 10 serious consequences that could unfold if homelessness is criminalized in 2026, from overloaded jails and broken families to wasted taxpayer money and eroded civil rights. But here's the most important takeaway. This future isn't inevitable. We still have time to choose a different path. We can invest in housing over handcuffs, care over punishment, and people over politics. Real solutions exist. Solutions that have worked in cities just like ours. But they require the will to see people as human beings, not problems to be hidden away. Every person on the street has a story, and every policy we create either pushes them further out or brings them one step closer to hope. So now the question is, what kind of society do we want to be? One that locks away the vulnerable, or one that fights for real, lasting solutions? The choice is ours, but the time to decide is running out.
Every time I opened that spreadsheet, my soul left my body.
I had that too, but I switched to Pipedrive.
This is how I always pictured sales in my head.
I didn't know it could be so organized.
Leave spreadsheets behind. Discover Pipedrive Sales CRM.